Hello, family members. Hope you're having a nice day today. This time, I want to talk to you about something that's probably going to be a little controversial. And maybe even a little bit hard for me to talk about, honestly. So, the reason why I'm making this video was I have a lot of young drag performer friends that I've made on YouTube. And so that's a lot of my exposure to what Gen Z people think or say or how they talk, what they care about, is these young, either current or former drag performers that I added when I was going through like a add every drag artist I can kind of phase. And really very beneficial. Highly recommend. Go through add every drag artist you can find phase on social media. It will make your life better. But anyway, my Facebook friend was posting multiple times about Lady Gaga being a Zionist. And I was like, oh, is she? I mean, that's a pretty serious accusation in the court of current public opinion, at least for her generation, or their generation, rather, I should say. Yeah, I needed to know. So I did a lot of research, and I'm going to tell you what I found out. But before we do, I'm going to disclose I'm a huge Lady Gaga nerd. It is what it is. That's just the truth. I was so obsessed with the Bad Romance video that I drove one of my best friends crazy at the time. She's like, all right, I like Lady Gaga, but I don't think everything that she does is the most genius thing ever. And I was definitely in that headspace when Bad Romance came out. I was obsessed. I'm the kind of Lady Gaga fan that'll tell you my favorite album is art pop. Unashamedly. Everyone else is like, well, no. A lot of people think of art pop as a flop, but to me it is brilliance. I love it. It's probably the album I listen to the most, although that fluctuates, obviously. I'm a big Lady Gaga fan. The only time that she goes places that I'm not interested is when she goes full country like you and I. Not for me. Don't like that pop country stuff. But basically everything else that she does is pretty awesome. I'm not, all right, I'm getting off track here. The point that I wanted to make, I could gush about her forever, sorry, is that I didn't want it to be true. Okay? I don't think that Zionism is, ethical. And primarily because it comes back to having a country where certain people are, by law, second-class citizens just by nature of their ethnicity or religion or race or whatever. That is never going to be an ethical state. You can't have that kind of apartheid and not have horrendous ways of imposing that and enforcing that on people. Because people aren't like, little dolls you can just move around and sort and put wherever you want. All of human history, humans have been moving. Immigration is something that is very integrated into the human experience. People like to be like, oh, there shouldn't be any black people in the Regency times in England. Is there were black people. And Hispanic people, and Indian people, and other kind of Indian people. There were lots of different kinds of people in Europe because it was a place where a lot of people moved to and from, and it was a hub of human interaction, and it still is. I mean, that's where my little brother from Zimbabwe lives. He and his English wife and their little mixed race daughter. That's your proof right there. You couldn't segregate people out because people don't segregate naturally, and in fact integrate, and then you get mixed race children who have heritage on both sides. And then how do you classify them? So anyway, that's my feelings on Zionism, is that it's just morally flawed. And what that means for Israel is that I don't believe that it can exist as is without causing atrocities to humans. And, I think we need to address that. And so when I feel that strongly about something, to find out that somebody that I admire and think of as a true artist and who really speaks to me, despite I have hearing loss, and so music just doesn't sound the same to me as it does to other people. I have partial hearing loss, and so finding music that really speaks to me isn't always easy for me. So I'm coming into this with heavy, heavy bias. That means that you should take what I have to say with a huge grain of salt and understand that my interpretation of what I found out may, and probably does, have lots of bias attached to it. So I wanted to be upfront about that before I really told you what I found out and what I think, because I don't want people to think that I'm just an objective observer here. I'm fully invested in what the answer is. So spent a couple of days Googling, looking around, poking on the internet, different social medias and news sites and everything. And what I can tell you right now is the answer to, is Lady Gaga Zionist, is I don't know. I don't know. There's a case to be made that she is, by actions that she's made and statements she's made. And there's a case to be made that she isn't Zionist, but is pro-Israeli people, and maybe... Let me kind of explain what I mean. So one of the biggest signs that she's potentially Zionist is that she performed in Israel. And when she performed in Israel, she said, "I love you, Israel." And she's also said that, people's perception of what Israel is around the world is flawed. And I can see where, if she has Zionist beliefs, that would be sort of a sanitized way of her expressing that. But I can also see a different interpretation of that. I imagine, one thing about Lady Gaga is she seems to really love performing and really feels like a connection to her audience. She always has this sort of parasocial relationship that she develops. And the thing about parasocial relationships is usually it's fully one-sided, but in her case, it's not entirely one-sided. And so I could see her being the kind of person that's performed in Israel before, felt bad for her fans that are there that are going through hardship, because you have to admit, even though what is happening and what has happened in Gaza is magnitudes worse than what happened in Israel on October 7th and also since then. It's just not even comparable. It's the scale of it is so beyond comparable. And so I could see where she feeling empathy for these fans that she's already kind of bonded with in this parasocial relationship, feeling like they deserve support, feeling like they deserve someone to say, hey, Israel isn't just one thing, which is true. There are certainly people in Israel that are very critical of the way that their government has been behaving. And, I get that. They're not a monolith. But I think the fact that it's questionable is maybe part of the point. Lady Gaga is the kind of person who sang at the inauguration. You remember that? It was really good. But yeah, she did. And she just sang at the pre-show for the Super Bowl, and she's done the Super Bowl halftime show, and she's done big boisterous Oscar performances, and she wants to be the highest level of stardom. Fame is part of her art form to her. And so part of being that broadly appealing means making sure that you don't rock the boat too hard. And she knows when to rock the boat and when to not rock the boat, quite frankly. I think she does that quite masterfully. There's certain things that she pushes on in certain ways, and certain times when she knows when to draw back and be a little more restrained. And so it may very well be that she is a Zionist and knows that's unpopular and is being sort of vague on purpose in order to hide that. The other thing that I considered is that potentially she's just ignorant. And I'll be honest, that's to me a very reasonable thought. Until about a year ago, I didn't really understand what was going on in Palestine. It wasn't until I watched the most informative video on YouTube, Shaun's Palestine video. If you haven't watched it, you ought to. I'll put a link in the description. It wasn't until I watched that I really understood, really saw Israel as Britain's last colony. And, though Britain has fallen in power, other states, including the United States, have stepped up to keep Israel in place. And colonies are not good. When Trump talks about, clearing Gaza out and just starting afresh, he doesn't understand, the ancestral love of those lands that the Gazan people feel. They've literally gone through hell to stay in Palestine. And the idea of just casually let's clean it out and start over afresh, that is such a weird, superficial understanding of land, of the connection people feel to land. It's not just a potential real estate investment. Okay. It's something that people can feel deeply connected to. I understand that. I used to love being out when I was hiking and seeing everything that there was to see and doing all the things there was to do and feeling really connected with the land. And I was often by myself, just me and a dog or two or three. And really got a chance to connect to some lands that are around here. And the idea of someone just going, well, let's just clear it out and start afresh and removing that wonderful space, it hurts my heart. And I've only been here for like less than 10 years. I'm not nearly as connected to this land as people from Gaza are connected to their homeland. And yeah, it's not a frivolous thing. It's not a frivolous connection that people have. And it can't be treated so frivolously, And I think that's why I am willing to potentially give Lady Gaga some grace here, because if she is ignorant, well, I was too until fairly recently. And it could very well be that she doesn't want to really lose that ignorance for, either personal reasons, professional reasons. I don't know who she knows. She may know quite a few Zionists that are really close to her and, was afraid of hurting them by, very publicly taking a stance one way or another on that, or about hurting herself or hurting her career. It's just really impossible for me to know how intentional it even would be if she is just ignorant of the situation. And, I don't think that if you really understand what's going on in Gaza, that you could go play in Israel. No matter how much you love your Israeli fans, the message that it sends to the world is not a positive message. And that's usually what Lady Gaga is going for, is positive messages. She just recently released a music video that has a section where there's a sitting down dance. And I just think of all the non-ambulatory Gaga fans that now have looks to cosplay and dances they can do while in their wheelchair or sitting in a chair or whatever. There's just this very casual inclusion of all different kinds of people in her music and in her videos. And I think that she wants to be a star and she wants to be a global force for good. And she wants people to feel loved and valid and important. And I don't think that if she is Zionist, it is out of any ill will towards Gazans or Palestinians or anyone else. I think it would be out of either callous business desires or out of, a sense of personal denial in order to not cause trouble in her life, one way or the other, personally, professionally, whatever. So, what does this mean? That she has given, reasonably supportive actions and statements that could be read as Zionist. Does that change how I view her art? How I will interact with her art? I don't think it will for the meantime. And I'll be honest, a lot of that is what I said before. It's really hard for me to find music that really speaks to me. I usually can like a song after I've heard it over, like a bunch of times, but I I can't hear lyrics. I don't really hear the lyrics part. You know, the singing is kind of like mushy to me. And so when I hear a song and I like it, the very first time I hear it, that is extremely unusual for me. And the new song that she put out, Abracadabra, I was halfway through that video. I was like, this is for me. I love this. I absolutely love this. And so I don't think that I have enough reason to ignore my love for that art, but I'm also going to be paying close attention to what Gaga says and does. And, if she comes out openly as a Zionist, that would definitely change the way I see her, think about her. So I guess my ultimate conclusion here is that I don't know if Lady Gaga is a Zionist. I can't know what's in her heart or in her mind. She hasn't made any clear statements one way or the other. There is evidence, certainly, that can lead you to a conclusion. And if you look at what she said and done and think she's obviously a Zionist, I don't think that's an unreasonable interpretation. I don't. It's not my interpretation. My interpretation is I just don't think there's enough concrete information for me to be able to say definitively one way or another. But if you look at the information that's out there, what I've discussed, and if you happen to look up more yourself, and you come to the conclusion she's a Zionist, I think that's reasonable. If you come to the conclusion that you don't think she's a Zionist, I also think that's kind of reasonable. And it's up to you personally what you think about and how much it means to you that she might be personally Zionist. That's something that I think is a kind of a personal decision. And I wouldn't fault anyone who decided they just didn't want to engage with her anymore because of this. I get that. I think back to this summer, I made a video about the whole Chapel Roan controversy, and how it really showed a generational divide, that people who were my age and older, maybe people who are a little younger than me, millennials, Gen X, and boomers, there were a lot of them that looked at what Chapel Roan said about the situation and were very critical of her because they felt like it might hurt the chances of the Democrats winning in the fall, which of course they lost epically. And I think that people who had that criticism got it kind of backwards. Instead of listening to what she was saying and thinking, oh, our strategy is completely fucked. We need to change directions immediately. This is a good sign that people that aren't engaging with the Democratic Party and aren't feeling like they want to vote for Kamala Harris or any Democrat, whatever, that we've lost them. She came out and she gave us that information, and a lot of people tried to criticize her instead of analyze what it was she was saying and how important it was. If we had listened to Chapel Roan in the summertime, would things be different? Could things be different? Maybe. Ever since I really understood what was going on in Gaza, I have been pretty critical of the Democrats and their inability to be fluid on this issue, to hear what their base was saying they wanted and needed. The fact that they wouldn't even put a single pro-Palestinian or Palestinian person on the DNC, the big old convention, they're, oh, we're gonna do great. They couldn't in an entire week give space to a single pro-Palestinian voice. That shows that they completely were out of touch with the people they wanted to vote for them. And they thought, and maybe they still do think, that they don't need to change, that, they're better than the alternative. And so people need to get in line. They'll see how bad things are for the next 4 years and get in line for whatever it is that, the party elite decides they want to do. And that's not going to happen. The Democratic elite have to contend with the fact that they are far, far more conservative than the vast majority of their voter base, or potential voter base at this point, because they're not voting for Democrats, right? Like, they are not being an effective opposition party. And I think that we are kind of stuck in this place where a lot of people, Gaga's age and older, are just willfully ignorant. Because if they open their eyes, if they see what's really going on, if they really understood the details, there's no way that they could ethically continue seeing the world the way they do. And having to completely change your worldview is not easy. Most people are not willing to do that. I think that this is something that, for me, is a little bit easier than the average person. And I'm not like trying to toot my own horn here, okay? I'm just saying that for me, I don't quite understand the impulse to be in that deep of denial, because I kind of love rooting out places where I'm in denial about things and like facing it. Like, that's like, I don't know, kind of a hobby of mine. And so, I'm not going to fault people who are not necessarily that self-reflective. I think it's probably a little excessive, but I have a lot of time on my hands, so, I think too much. But I think that right now, I'm just going to have to withhold judgment. And I have to be, kind of keeping my eyes open, because we are in a place where if you're not actively resisting, you are complicit in what's going on. Anyone who is willing to uphold the status quo is not our ally right now. Like, think about MSNBC, the left-leaning news channel, getting rid of Mehdi Hassan because he was being honest about what was going on in Israel and Gaza. And the powers that be, even the left-leaning powers that be, did not want the information he was giving to be given to the public, because it could potentially open a lot of people's eyes, change a lot of minds, and that could upset the status quo. And so there's nobody who is like nationally famous, basically. No one who can get to that level of exposure that isn't on some level beholden to interests that want to maintain the status quo. You know, you don't get to go beyond the Super Bowl if you're not willing to kind of play their game to a certain extent. And don't get me wrong, Gaga, within those sort of limitations, still finds ways to make statements that are subversive. They're there, but they're also done in a way that's subtle enough that they don't scare the normies, you know? And, you know, if you want to be a successful musician in the way she is, you need fans of all varieties, normies included. So, I don't know. She has a pretty good motivation to hide Zionism if she does hold that belief. I will say that for certain. And she also has a fairly high likelihood of willful ignorance being the reason that she has not taken any sort of real stance here, you know? So keep your eyes peeled, people. Take a minute to question yourself. Question everything. Understand that people are multifaceted. Even if Lady Gaga ultimately is proved to be a Zionist, I don't know that I will completely lose my connection to her art. It's just been too meaningful to me. And separating the art from the artist is sort of a contentious thing. And with Lady Gaga, it's pretty hard. She is the art, you know, like her actual existence is sort of a performance art, right? And so separating her from her art, I don't know if you can do that. So I'm not sure. I keep coming back. I keep circling around. I've spent half an hour telling you I just don't know. But it's the truth. She either is or isn't Zionist. And it either matters or doesn't matter. And I don't have the answers yet. And that's frustrating to me, you know. I want to wholeheartedly love her. But